people imagine medieval Europe, they often picture castles rising above mist-covered hills, armored knights riding toward battle, or kings issuing commands from candlelit halls. Yet, for the vast majority of people who lived between the 11th and 14th centuries, life was far quieter, slower, and far more repetitive than popular imagination suggests. Most medieval men and women never saw the inside of a castle, never traveled more than a few miles from their birthplace, and never met a king. Their world was measured not in dynasties or wars, but in seasons, weather, labor, and survival. To understand medieval Europe properly, it is necessary to step away from dramatic events and instead observe the rhythms of ordinary life. The medieval world was not static, but it changed gradually, shaped by agriculture, religion, local customs, and the constant uncertainty of nature. Life was structured around work, faith, and community, with little separation between them. For most people, the day began before sunrise. Artificial lighting was expensive and limited, so the schedule of life followed daylight closely. In rural villages, which housed the overwhelming majority of the population, mornings began with physical labor almost immediately. Fields needed tending, animals needed feeding, tools required repair, and household tasks never truly ended. Men, women, and children all worked, though their tasks differed according to age, strength, and local tradition. Agriculture was the foundation of medieval life. Even city dwellers depended entirely on the countryside for food, and poor harvests could affect entire regions. Most farmers practiced subsistence agriculture, meaning they grew just enough to survive with little surplus. Wheat, barley, rye, and oats formed the backbone of the medieval diet, supplemented by vegetables such as cabbage, onions, peas, and beans. Meat was rare for peasants and usually reserved for special occasions. Bread, often coarse and dark, was eaten daily and formed the core of nearly every meal. Homes were simple and functional. In villages, houses were typically constructed from wood, wattle and daub, or stone where available. Roofs were thatched, floors were often packed earth, and windows were small or absent altogether. Smoke from the hearth filled the interior, escaping slowly through the roof. Privacy was minimal. Entire families slept in the same space, sometimes alongside animals during colder months, as their body heat helped warm the home. Cleanliness, by modern standards, was limited but not absent. Medieval people did bathe, though not frequently, and public bathhouses existed in many towns, especially before the later Middle Ages. Water had to be carried by hand, making daily bathing impractical. Clothing was worn repeatedly, repaired carefully, and passed down through families. Nothing was wasted. Fabric was valuable, and even worn-out garments were reused as rags or padding. Religion shaped every aspect of medieval life. The church calendar structured the year, marking not only holy days but also periods of fasting and feasting. Bells rang to signal prayer, work, and rest. For most people, faith was not abstract or philosophical. It was immediate and practical. God explained the weather, illness, success, and disaster. Saints were invoked for protection, healing, and guidance. Life was understood as temporary preparation for the afterlife, which made suffering more tolerable and obedience more meaningful. Education was rare outside monasteries and cathedral schools. Most people could not read or write, and knowledge was transmitted orally. Stories, proverbs, sermons, and local traditions carried history and moral lessons from one generation to the next. Memory mattered more than books, and repetition ensured survival of essential knowledge. Children were not sheltered in the modern sense. From a young age, they contributed to household labor. Childhood was brief and adulthood arrived early. By their early teens, many children were already working full-time, apprenticed to a trade, or preparing for marriage. Life expectancy was low, largely due to high infant mortality, but those who survived childhood often lived into their 50s or beyond. Disease was an ever-present threat. Without an understanding of germs, illness was attributed to divine will, bad air, or imbalance in bodily humors. Treatments ranged from herbal remedies to prayer and bloodletting. Medical knowledge existed, but it was limited and unevenly applied. Major outbreaks, such as recurring plagues, could devastate entire communities and reshape social structures. Despite hardship, medieval life was not uniformly bleak. Communities were tightly knit. Festivals, weddings, and seasonal celebrations brought moments of joy and relief. Music, storytelling, and games were common forms of entertainment. People laughed, argued, loved, and hoped much as they do today, within the boundaries set by their world. Time moved differently in the medieval mind. Without clocks for most of the period, time was felt rather than measured. Days blended into seasons, and years were remembered by events rather than dates. Change was slow, but it was constant. New tools, new crops, and gradual social shifts slowly altered daily life, even if people did not recognize them as historical change. As the centuries progressed, towns grew, trade expanded, and new opportunities emerged. Yet even then, the core experience of medieval life remained rooted in labor, faith, and survival. Understanding this ordinary existence allows us to see medieval Europe not as a distant fantasy, but as a lived human world shaped by constraints, resilience, and quiet endurance. As medieval Europe moved deeper into the 13th century, differences between rural and urban life became more pronounced, yet both remained bound by the same fundamental realities. Towns grew slowly, often around rivers, trade routes, monasteries, or former Roman settlements. Their walls marked not only physical boundaries but social ones as well. Inside lived merchants, craftsmen, clergy, and laborers whose lives followed patterns distinct from the countryside, though still shaped by work, faith, and uncertainty. Urban life offered opportunities unavailable in villages, but it also brought new risks. Towns were crowded, noisy, and often unsanitary. Waste disposal systems were rudimentary, and streets were narrow. Animals wandered freely, and water sources were easily contaminated. Fire was a constant danger. A single overturned candle or neglected hearth could destroy entire neighborhoods built from wood and thatch. Yet people continued to migrate to towns because cities offered wages, trade, and a degree of personal freedom unknown in rural serfdom. Guilds dominated urban economic life. These organizations regulated trades such as blacksmithing, weaving, carpentry, baking, and metalwork. Membership was tightly controlled. Apprentices trained for years under masters, learning skills through observation and repetition rather than written instruction. Advancement depended not only on skill, but on reputation, loyalty, and social connections. Guilds set prices, controlled quality, and protected their members from competition, creating stability at the cost of innovation. Women participated actively in medieval economies, though their roles were shaped by custom and law. In villages, women worked in fields, tended animals, brewed ale, spun wool, and managed households. In towns, women assisted in family workshops, sold goods in markets, and in some cases operated businesses as widows. While legal rights were limited, Daily responsibilities granted women significant practical authority within households and communities. Marriage was less about romance and more about survival and stability. Families arranged matches based on land, labor, and alliances. Love could grow over time, but it was rarely the foundation of marriage itself. Childbirth was dangerous, and many women died young, shaping family structures that included remarriage and blended households. The presence of death was constant, and people learned to live alongside it without the distance modern societies often maintain. Food shortages were a recurring threat. A single failed harvest could lead to famine, malnutrition, and social unrest. Weather patterns dictated survival. Long rains ruined crops, harsh winters killed livestock, and droughts brought hunger. Without large-scale storage or transportation systems, communities were vulnerable to local disaster. During times of scarcity, social hierarchies tightened, and the poorest suffered first. Yet medieval society was not without mechanisms of support. Churches provided charity, monasteries offered shelter to travelers and the sick, and communities relied on mutual aid during crises. While inequality was real and often severe, complete abandonment was rare. Survival depended on cooperation as much as competition. The concept of law in medieval Europe was personal and localized. Justice was administered by lords, town councils, or church courts, depending on the issue. Punishments were public, intended to shame as well as deter. Prisons were uncommon. Fines, labor, or corporal punishment were more typical responses to wrongdoing. Order was maintained not through centralized authority, but through social pressure and shared norms. Over time, subtle changes began reshaping medieval life. Improved farming techniques increased yields. New tools such as heavier plows and horse collars expanded usable land. Trade networks connected distant regions, introducing new goods and ideas. Literacy slowly spread beyond religious institutions, particularly among merchants. These developments did not transform life overnight, but they laid the groundwork for profound change. The 14th century brought one of the greatest challenges medieval Europe would ever face. Disease, most notably the Great Plague outbreaks, disrupted every aspect of life. Entire villages disappeared. Labor shortages shifted power dynamics between workers and landowners. Long-standing assumptions about divine order were questioned, though rarely openly rejected. Survival itself became uncertain in ways previously unimaginable. And yet, even in the face of catastrophe, everyday life continued. Fields were replanted, children were born, communities rebuilt. The medieval world endured not because it was unchanging, but because its people adapted quietly, generation by generation, to forces they could not control. To study everyday life in medieval Europe is to encounter humanity at its most fundamental. These were lives defined not by spectacle, but by persistence. Their world lacked modern comforts, yet it was rich in meaning, structure, and shared experience. Understanding how ordinary people lived allows us to see the Middle Ages not as a distant and alien time, but as a deeply human chapter in the long story of Europe. The echoes of that world remain with us still, embedded in landscapes, traditions, and institutions that outlasted the medieval centuries themselves. Even as medieval Europe gradually moved toward the end of the Middle Ages, continuity remained stronger than change for most people. Historical transitions that appeared dramatic in hindsight unfolded slowly in daily life. New ideas filtered unevenly through society, often taking generations to alter habits that had long ensured survival. For ordinary people, the pressing concerns of food, shelter, family, and faith remained constant, regardless of political or intellectual developments occurring beyond their immediate surroundings. One of the most defining aspects of medieval existence was the relationship between people and the land. Land was not simply property. It was identity, security, and legacy. Fields were inherited, divided, and fought over, but rarely abandoned willingly. The agricultural calendar governed emotional life as much as physical labor. Hope rose with spring planting, anxiety followed summer storms, and relief or despair arrived with the harvest. These cycles shaped mental endurance and fostered a deep familiarity with nature's rhythms. Work itself was physically demanding but highly skilled. Farmers understood soil quality, weather patterns, animal behavior, and crop rotation through experience rather than theory. Craftsmen possessed knowledge refined over decades. A poorly made tool or a misjudged repair could have serious consequences. Skill was respected even when status was low, because competence meant survival not only for the individual but for the community. Leisure existed, though it was modest. Games, music, and storytelling offered moments of escape. Seasonal festivals brought color and noise into otherwise restrained lives. These gatherings reinforced social bonds, transmitted traditions, and allowed temporary release from rigid hierarchies. Humor, often coarse and practical, reflected the realities of life rather than idealized fantasies. Aging was visible and accepted. There were few ways to conceal physical decline, and elder members of the community often held informal authority based on experience. Wisdom was associated with endurance rather than education. Advice carried weight because it was proven, not theoretical. Old age, when reached, was a sign of resilience. Death was ever present, yet it was not hidden away. Bodies were prepared by family members, funerals were communal, and burial grounds were part of everyday landscapes. The boundary between the living and the dead felt closer than it does in modern societies. This proximity shaped a worldview in which life was fragile but meaningful, and time was borrowed rather than owned. As medieval Europe approached the 15th century, pressures accumulated. Population shifts, economic strain, and social unrest hinted at transformation. Yet for ordinary people, change still arrived quietly. A new tool here, a different crop there, a gradual adjustment in obligations or opportunities. Revolutions, when they came, were rarely experienced as sudden breaks, but as slow reconfigurations of familiar routines. The medieval world did not vanish overnight. Its structures faded gradually, blending into what followed. Many aspects of medieval daily life, local identity, seasonal labor, community reliance, and practical faith, persisted long after the Middle Ages were said to end. Even today, traces remain embedded in rural customs, town layouts, and cultural assumptions inherited from that distant past. By focusing on ordinary people rather than extraordinary events, medieval Europe becomes more comprehensible and more relatable. These were not passive figures waiting for history to happen to them. They were active participants in their own survival, shaping a world that endured for centuries through adaptability, cooperation, and quiet determination. This understanding allows us to appreciate the Middle Ages not as a dark or simplistic era, but as a complex human environment defined by constraint and creativity in equal measure. In their everyday lives, medieval Europeans built the foundations upon which later societies would stand, often unknowingly, always persistently. The story of medieval Europe, when told through the lens of ordinary experience, becomes a reminder that history is not only made by rulers and wars, but by countless lives lived carefully, patiently, and with enduring resolve. Across medieval Europe, daily life was never uniform. Geography, climate, and local custom shaped experience as profoundly as social class. A farmer in northern England lived a different life from one in southern Italy, just as a merchant in Bruges encountered a different world than a trader in Florence. Yet beneath these regional differences lay shared patterns that bound the medieval world together. In the colder regions of northern Europe, survival depended heavily on preparation. Long winters required careful storage of grain, dried meat, and preserved vegetables. Homes were built to retain heat, and communal labor was essential during harvests to ensure enough food for the months ahead. The rhythm of work intensified as winter approached, and leisure narrowed as daylight shortened. In warmer southern regions, agricultural cycles allowed for multiple harvests, but drought and water management posed constant challenges. Irrigation systems, inherited in part from earlier civilizations, were vital to sustaining life. Climate fluctuations played a quiet but powerful role in shaping medieval existence. Periods of warmer weather expanded farmland and increased population, while colder decades brought famine and instability. These shifts were not understood scientifically, but their effects were deeply felt. Communities adapted through trial and error, altering crops, changing settlement patterns, or migrating when survival demanded it. Resilience was learned not through planning, but through experience. Trade routes connected these varied regions, carrying goods, ideas, and people across vast distances. Salt, wool, grain, wine, and cloth moved along rivers and roads, linking distant economies. For most people, these networks were invisible, but their effects reached even the smallest villages. A change in trade could alter local prices, availability of goods, or opportunities for work. The medieval economy was fragile, but interconnected in ways often underestimated. Social hierarchy structured medieval life, but it was not entirely rigid. While birth determined much, opportunity could arise through skill, marriage, or service. Towns, in particular, offered limited mobility. A successful craftsman or merchant could achieve a degree of independence and respect unavailable in rural life. Even so, inequality remained a defining feature of the era, accepted as part of a divinely ordered world. Authority was experienced locally rather than abstractly. Lords, priests, guild masters, and elders represented power not as distant institutions, but as familiar figures. Obedience was negotiated through custom, obligation, and personal relationships. Conflict arose when expectations were violated, whether through excessive demands, perceived injustice, or hardship beyond tolerance. Resistance was usually subtle, delayed labor, quiet defiance, or migration, rather than open rebellion. Education, where it existed, reinforced continuity. Knowledge emphasized tradition, moral instruction, and practical skill. Innovation occurred slowly and often anonymously. The medieval world valued stability over progress, not because change was feared, but because survival depended on proven methods. Experimentation carried risks few could afford. As the medieval period edged toward transformation, the foundations of daily life remained recognizable. People still rose with the sun, labored with their hands, and placed faith at the center of understanding. What changed was not the structure of life itself, but the pressures acting upon it. Population recovery after catastrophe, expansion of trade, and gradual political centralization reshaped possibilities without immediately altering routines. The transition into the early modern world did not erase medieval life. It absorbed it, practices refined over centuries continued under new conditions. The habits of patience, cooperation, and endurance carried forward, shaping societies long after medieval labels faded. To listen to the story of everyday medieval life is to hear a quiet narrative, one without grand declarations or sudden turning points. It is a story told through repetition, adaptation, and shared labor. These lives remind us that history is sustained not by moments of spectacle, but by continuity. In understanding how ordinary people lived in medieval Europe, we gain more than knowledge of the past. We gain perspective on the human capacity to endure, to adapt, and to find meaning within limitation. This is the deeper legacy of the medieval world, not its castles or crowns, but the countless lives that carried civilization forward, one day at a time. As the medieval centuries drew toward their close, the accumulated weight of small changes began to alter the texture of everyday life, even if those living through it did not perceive themselves as standing at the edge of a new age. For ordinary people, continuity still mattered more than transformation. What shifted most noticeably were expectations about work, authority, and possibility, rather than the basic structure of daily existence. In many regions, population recovery after periods of crisis placed new pressure on land. Fields that had once been abandoned were brought back into use. Forests were cleared, marshes drained, and marginal soils cultivated despite their lower yields. This expansion demanded greater effort for diminishing returns, increasing physical strain while reinforcing dependence on favorable weather. Life became no easier, but it became more densely lived. Labor relationships slowly evolved. In some areas, traditional obligations softened as landowners struggled to secure workers. In others, attempts to reassert control produced tension and resentment. These shifts rarely appeared dramatic at ground level. They emerged as altered rents, adjusted expectations, or the quiet renegotiation of duties. The language of contracts remained limited, but custom itself adapted under pressure. Material culture also changed subtly. Tools improved incrementally. Clothing styles shifted as trade expanded access to dyes and fabrics. Homes gained small refinements, a better hearth, sturdier walls, or modest separation of spaces. These changes accumulated over generations, gradually altering comfort without erasing hardship. Progress was measured in durability rather than luxury. The role of faith, though still central, took on more complex forms. Devotion remained sincere and deeply woven into daily routine. Yet questions emerged during times of suffering that prayer alone did not resolve. New devotional practices emphasized personal reflection alongside communal worship. These developments did not weaken belief, but they reshaped how individuals related to it, particularly in moments of loss. Urban life continued to draw those seeking alternatives to rural dependence. Towns offered not freedom from labor, but different kinds of labor. Time became more regulated. Bells marked work hours, markets followed schedules, and agreements gained greater importance. The sense of time as something structured rather than simply experienced began to take hold, though unevenly and slowly. Despite these shifts, the core emotional landscape of medieval life remained familiar. Anxiety over food, concern for family, fear of illness, and hope for stability dominated thought. Joy was found not in abundance, but in relief, in a successful harvest, a healthy child, or a peaceful season. Gratitude carried weight because it was earned. Memory played a powerful role in shaping identity. Stories of past hardship, survival, and endurance informed present behavior. Elders recalled earlier famines, colder winters, or lost neighbors, offering perspective that tempered expectations. History was not abstract. It lived within living memory, shaping decisions and reinforcing caution. As new centuries approached, medieval life did not end. It transformed by accumulation. Practices refined under constraint became foundations for what followed. The patience learned through agricultural cycles, the cooperation forged through communal labor, and the resilience built through repeated adversity carried forward into emerging social forms. In this way, the medieval world did not collapse into the modern one. It flowed into it, carrying habits of thought and survival shaped over centuries. To understand medieval Europe through everyday life is to recognize that history advances not only through decisive moments, but through the steady persistence of ordinary people adapting to a changing world. The quiet strength of medieval society lay in its ability to endure without certainty. That endurance, repeated across generations, became its greatest legacy. As the familiar patterns of medieval life continued into the later centuries, the relationship between individuals and their communities grew ever more significant. Survival was rarely an individual achievement. It depended on shared labor, mutual obligation, and an unspoken understanding that no one endured hardship alone. Villages functioned as collective organisms, adapting together to scarcity, loss, and recovery. Work was not merely a means of sustenance but a moral expectation. To contribute was to belong. Those unable to work due to age or illness were supported not out of charity alone, but because communal survival depended on preserving social cohesion. Exclusion carried real danger, not only materially but emotionally. Belonging offered protection, meaning, and identity. Custom governed behavior more powerfully than written law. People knew what was expected because it had always been done that way. These unwritten rules regulated marriage, inheritance, work rhythms, and conflict resolution. Breaking them invited social consequences more severe than formal punishment. Reputation mattered deeply, and trust was built slowly through consistency and shared experience. Language and dialect reinforced local identity. Most people spoke only the language of their region, and even neighboring villages could sound unfamiliar to one another. This linguistic closeness strengthened bonds while limiting mobility. The wider world existed largely through rumor, travelers' tales, and church teaching rather than direct experience. Conflict, when it arose, was usually small in scale but emotionally intense. Disputes over land boundaries, labor obligations, or personal honor could divide communities for years. Resolution relied on mediation rather than force, with elders or local authorities intervening to restore balance. Stability mattered more than justice in the abstract. Peace preserved survival. As time passed, new generations inherited not only land and tools, but memory. Children learned the limits of their world early. They absorbed caution alongside skill, patience alongside effort. Aspirations were shaped by what had proven possible, not by what could be imagined. Ambition existed, but it was restrained by realism. Seasonal rhythms continued to anchor life. The repetition of planting, tending, and harvesting offered reassurance even amid uncertainty. Familiar tasks provided structure in a world where little could be predicted. In this repetition, medieval people found continuity and purpose. When viewed across centuries, the medieval experience reveals itself not as stagnant, but as carefully balanced. Change occurred, but slowly, filtered through the need for stability. Innovation was accepted when it preserved life, resisted when it threatened cohesion. The enduring image of medieval Europe when stripped of drama and legend, is one of persistence. Ordinary people carried forward their world through quiet endurance, shaping history not through singular acts, but through daily repetition. Their lives remind us that the past was not lived in chapters or eras, but one day at a time. And it is in those days, unremarkable, demanding, and deeply human, that the true story of medieval Europe unfolds. As these patterns of life repeated across generations, medieval Europe developed a deep sense of continuity that shaped how people understood their place in the world. The future was not imagined as something fundamentally different from the past, but as an extension of it. Progress as a concept was less important than balance. Stability was valued because instability threatened survival. This outlook influenced how people responded to hardship. When floods destroyed crops or illness swept through a household, suffering was interpreted not as a failure of systems, but as part of existence itself. Endurance became a virtue. Patience was learned early and practiced daily. Complaints were voiced, but expectations remained grounded in what experience had shown to be possible. Faith continued to offer a framework for understanding uncertainty. Prayer, ritual, and communal worship provided structure in moments when answers were unavailable. The church calendar gave meaning to time, turning the passing of days into a shared narrative of anticipation and reflection. Even those who struggled materially found reassurance in belonging to something larger than themselves. Material possessions remained few, but they carried weight. Tools were repaired repeatedly, inherited, and respected. Objects were valued not for novelty, but for reliability. A well-made plow or a sturdy cloak represented security earned through effort. Ownership implied responsibility, and loss was felt deeply. Travel was rare for most, but movement still shaped perception. Pilgrims, traders, and messengers carried stories between regions, expanding awareness of a wider world without dissolving local identity. These accounts mixed fact with interpretation, reinforcing both curiosity and caution about what lay beyond familiar boundaries. As generations passed, gradual transformations accumulated beneath the surface of routine. Markets expanded, written records increased, and administrative practices became more standardized. Yet, for the majority, these developments altered daily life only indirectly. What mattered most remained immediate: weather, health, harvest, and family. The medieval experience, viewed through everyday life, reveals a society finely tuned to survival under constraint. Creativity emerged not through excess, but through adaptation. People learned to live within limits, adjusting expectations rather than constantly reshaping their environment. In this sense, medieval Europe offers a lesson in resilience. As people endured not because their lives were easy, but because they understood hardship as temporary and shared. Community softened individual struggle, and repetition provided reassurance. As the medieval world slowly gave way to new social forms, these habits did not disappear. They carried forward, shaping attitudes toward work, responsibility, and belonging long after medieval structures themselves had faded. The story of everyday medieval life is therefore not one of stagnation, but of sustained human effort. It is a reminder that history advances not only through visible change, but through the quiet persistence of ordinary lives, lived with patience, care, and enduring resolve. Over centuries of repetition, these patterns produced a worldview shaped less by aspiration than by acceptance. Medieval people did not expect life to become easier for the next generation. The hope was continuity rather than improvement. Parents aimed to pass on land, skills and stability, not advancement. A life lived much like one's parents' lives was considered successful, not disappointing. This mindset fostered a deep attentiveness to the present. Without confidence in long-term change, meaning was found in immediate responsibilities. A well-kept field, a healthy household, a respected reputation, these were measures of accomplishment. Achievement was practical, not symbolic. Survival itself carried dignity. Nature remained an active presence rather than a background condition. Weather was watched closely, animals observed carefully, and landscapes read like texts. Signs mattered. The behavior of birds, the timing of blossoms, the quality of soil after rain. This attentiveness created an intimacy with the environment that shaped decision-making at every level of life. Illness, when it came, altered routines quickly. Care was communal. Neighbors assisted with labor, prepared food, and offered prayers. Recovery or death was accepted without illusion. Grief was expressed openly, then absorbed back into routine. Life resumed not because loss was insignificant, but because stopping entirely was not possible. Memory anchored identity. People remembered years by events rather than numbers. The year of the Great Frost, the year the river flooded, the year a child survived illness. These shared memories created a collective timeline, reinforcing community bonds and a sense of endurance across time. Even joy carried restraint. Celebrations were brief and intense. Then life returned to its rhythm. Excess was discouraged not by law alone, but by practicality. Resources saved could mean survival later. Moderation was not moral abstraction. It was lived wisdom. As medieval Europe moved toward transformation, many of its people remained unaware that they were nearing the end of an era. They did not live in the Middle Ages as a concept. They lived in villages, households, and seasons. History labels would come later, imposed by those looking back. What endured from this world was not a single institution or belief, but a way of inhabiting time. Life was cyclical, grounded, and relational. Identity was collective before it was individual. Responsibility outweighed ambition. Endurance outweighed expectation. By listening closely to everyday medieval life, we encounter a form of humanity shaped by limits yet rich in continuity. These lives remind us that history is not only a record of transformation, but a testament to persistence. Long before modern notions of progress, people learned how to live fully within constraint. And it is in that quiet mastery of survival, repeated across centuries, that the true legacy of medieval Europe resides. As this way of life repeated itself across centuries, medieval Europe developed an extraordinary capacity for normalization. Hardship, which might feel unbearable when encountered suddenly, became manageable when it was expected. This expectation did not remove suffering, but it altered how people responded to it. Difficulty was not seen as an interruption to life. It was life. This outlook shaped emotional resilience. Fear existed, but it was tempered by familiarity. Hunger, illness, and loss were not abstract threats, but known experiences that communities had survived before. Stories of endurance circulated alongside warnings, reinforcing the belief that survival, while uncertain, was possible. Hope was cautious and grounded, never extravagant. The household remained the central unit of life. It was a place of work, care, instruction, and authority. Relationships within it were hierarchical, but also deeply interdependent. Each member's contribution mattered. The success of the household determined standing within the community, reinforcing responsibility across generations. Moral expectations were practical. Virtue was demonstrated through reliability rather than idealism. A person who fulfilled obligations, respected custom, and maintained harmony was valued more than one who challenged norms, even with good intentions. Stability carried moral weight because instability carried risk. As material conditions shifted gradually, so too did perception. The introduction of new crops, tools, or methods altered daily routines almost imperceptibly. These changes were rarely celebrated. They were adopted cautiously, tested over time, and accepted only when proven dependable. Innovation survived when it preserved life, not when it promised improvement alone. The medieval relationship with time remained deeply rooted in experience. The future was uncertain, but the past offered instruction. Change was evaluated through memory rather than expectation. What had worked before deserved trust. What failed was remembered. Even as wider political and economic structures evolved, everyday life retained its essential form. The medieval world was not undone by sudden collapse, but slowly reshaped by pressures that accumulated beyond the awareness of ordinary people. They adapted without naming adaptation, endured without framing endurance as virtue. When we trace this continuity, the medieval period emerges not as an age defined by ignorance or stagnation, but as one defined by equilibrium. People lived within limits, balanced need against capacity, and accepted constraint as a condition of existence rather than a problem to be solved. In doing so, they sustained societies over centuries of uncertainty. Their lives, measured not by milestones but by seasons, carried forward the fabric of European civilization quietly and persistently. The legacy of everyday medieval life is therefore not found in monuments or chronicles alone, but in habits of survival refined through repetition. It is a reminder that the foundations of history are laid not only by dramatic change, but by the steady, patient continuation of ordinary human life. As the medieval world carried itself forward through this steady continuation, a particular form of quiet wisdom emerged, one rooted not in theory, but in lived experience. Knowledge was validated by endurance. If a method of farming, a way of building, or a social practice persisted, it did so because it had proven itself against failure. Survival was the measure of truth. This way of knowing shaped attitudes toward authority. Respect was given not simply because of rank, but because authority figures were expected to maintain balance. A lord who demanded too much risked empty fields. A priest who ignored suffering lost trust. Power, though unequal, was constrained by practical limits. Order depended on mutual dependence as much as command. The medieval sense of self was inseparable from place. Identity was tied to land, household, and community rather than abstract individuality. To belong was to be known, to have one's history, behavior, and reliability remembered. This visibility encouraged conformity, but it also fostered accountability. Actions mattered because they endured in memory. Silence, too, played a role in daily life. Not everything was spoken. Endurance often required restraint. Emotions were expressed within accepted boundaries, then absorbed back into routine. This was not emotional absence, but emotional regulation shaped by necessity. Survival required steadiness. As generations passed, the accumulation of small adaptations slowly reshaped society. New patterns formed almost invisibly, yet the underlying rhythm remained familiar. People rose, worked, rested, prayed, and slept much as their ancestors had. Change occurred within continuity, not in opposition to it. From a distance, Medieval Europe may appear defined by limitation, but within those limits, people constructed meaningful lives. They formed bonds, fulfilled duties, and passed forward knowledge refined by experience. Their world was not small to them, it was complete. To understand medieval Europe through everyday life is to recognize history as a lived process rather than a sequence of events. It is to see civilization carried forward by patience rather than momentum, by repetition rather than rupture. And in that quiet persistence, in fields worked year after year, in households maintained across generations, in communities bound by shared memory, the medieval world reveals its deepest truth, that the continuity of ordinary life is itself one of history's greatest achievements. As this continuity extended across centuries, medieval life cultivated a profound tolerance for uncertainty. People learned to live without guarantees. Harvests could fail, illness could arrive without warning, and security could dissolve quickly. Rather than seeking control over these uncertainties, medieval societies developed ways to live alongside them. Acceptance was not resignation, but a form of endurance shaped by experience. This endurance influenced how meaning was constructed. Purpose was not derived from personal achievement alone, but from fulfillment of role. Each person occupied a place within a broader structure that predated them and would continue after they were gone. To maintain that structure, to work the land, raise children, preserve customs, was to contribute to something lasting. Continuity itself became a source of meaning. Responsibility extended beyond the living. Ancestors were remembered not as distant figures, but as presences whose labor had shaped the present. Fields cleared long ago, homes built and rebuilt, paths worn into the landscape, all served as reminders that life was an inheritance as much as an experience. This awareness fostered humility. People understood themselves as temporary caretakers rather than owners. Silence between generations carried instruction. Children learned by watching rather than questioning. Skills were absorbed through repetition, not explanation. This mode of learning prioritized reliability over innovation. What mattered was not originality, but correctness. A task done well in the proper way ensured continuity. The medieval relationship with hardship was shaped by this inherited knowledge. Suffering was not romanticized, but it was understood. Communities recognized that endurance required balance. Too much strain broke people, too little effort threatened survival. Social systems evolved to maintain that balance, however imperfectly. As centuries passed, these systems absorbed new pressures. Trade expanded, populations shifted, and external influences arrived more frequently. Yet the core habits of medieval life adapted without dissolving. People incorporated change into familiar routines, reshaping practice while preserving structure. In this way, medieval Europe functioned less as a rigid system and more as a living organism. It responded to stress by adjusting rather than collapsing. Its strength lay not in resistance to change, but in its capacity to absorb it slowly. When we step back and listen to this long, quiet story, a different image of the Middle Ages emerges. Not a world frozen in time, but one moving deliberately, guided by necessity rather than ambition. A world sustained by countless ordinary decisions, repeated faithfully across generations. This is the deeper rhythm of medieval Europe, a civilization carried forward not by spectacle or speed, but by steadiness. And it is within that steadiness, often overlooked, rarely celebrated, that the medieval world found its enduring strength. As this steadiness continued to define medieval life, it shaped a particular relationship with hope. Hope was present, but it was restrained. It did not imagine dramatic improvement, only the continuation of what was necessary. A good season, a healthy household, a peaceful year. These were sufficient aspirations. Anything beyond them felt uncertain and distant. This restraint influenced how people understood success and failure. A failed harvest was not a personal failing, nor was a prosperous year a sign of superiority. Fortune was recognized as uneven and temporary. This understanding softened extremes of pride and despair. Life demanded effort, but it did not promise reward in proportion to that effort. Social bonds gained strength from this shared vulnerability. People relied on one another not because of idealism, but because isolation was dangerous. Cooperation was practical. Trust was earned through consistency, not declarations. A neighbor who showed up during hardship became indispensable, remembered long after circumstances improved. Over time, these relationships formed dense networks of obligation and memory. Communities knew who could be relied upon, who needed help, and who carried unresolved disputes. Social knowledge functioned as a form of governance, maintaining order without constant intervention. Stability was preserved through familiarity. The pace of medieval life allowed little room for abstraction. Philosophy, where it existed, remained largely confined to religious institutions. For most people, understanding came through doing. Knowledge was embodied in habit rather than articulated in theory. This grounded perspective kept life practical, focused on what could be acted upon. Even creativity followed this pattern. Innovation appeared as refinement rather than reinvention. A stronger joint in a tool, a more efficient arrangement of space, a slight adjustment in planting, these small improvements mattered. They were rarely recorded, yet they accumulated, shaping life gradually. As generations replaced one another, the medieval world remained recognizable to itself. A person born centuries apart might still recognize the same rhythms, challenges, and expectations. This continuity offered reassurance. Life was difficult, but it was known. When viewed from the present, this endurance can appear static. Yet within it lay remarkable adaptability. Medieval societies survived climate shifts, population collapse, and economic disruption not by accelerating change, but by slowing it. They absorbed shock by returning to what had worked before. In this way, everyday medieval life reveals a form of resilience that does not rely on progress as we understand it today. It relied instead on memory, cooperation, and patience. These qualities allowed ordinary people to carry their world forward through centuries of uncertainty. And as their lives unfolded quietly, day after day, they formed the deep, unseen foundation upon which later transformations would eventually stand. As this long endurance continued, medieval life cultivated an ethic of attention. People watched closely, not out of curiosity but necessity. Subtle changes in weather, soil, animal behavior, or human mood could signal approaching difficulty. Awareness was sharpened by dependence. Nothing was entirely background. Everything mattered because everything could affect survival. This attentiveness extended to relationships. Social harmony required constant maintenance. Words were chosen carefully, disputes managed quietly, and favors remembered. Forgiveness was often pragmatic rather than moral. Grudges carried costs. Reconciliation preserved stability. In small communities, peace was not an ideal. It was a requirement. The emotional life of medieval people was shaped by this constant negotiation. Feelings were experienced deeply, but expressed within narrow channels. Excessive grief, anger, or joy disrupted balance. Emotional restraint was learned early, reinforced by observation and consequence. Strength was measured by composure as much as by labor. Over time, this restraint created a culture of endurance that could appear distant to modern observers. Yet it was not indifference. It was care expressed through continuity. To continue working, tending, and maintaining after loss was not denial, but commitment to family, to land, to life itself. As medieval Europe moved gradually toward broader transformation, the habits formed under constraint remained influential. People carried forward their expectations, their caution, and their sense of proportion. New circumstances were interpreted through old experience. Change was accepted when it fit within familiar patterns and resisted when it threatened cohesion. In this way, the medieval world shaped the transition that followed it. Early modern societies inherited not only institutions, but habits of mind, patience, suspicion of excess, and reliance on proven practice. These qualities did not vanish with new technologies or ideas. They adapted just as medieval people always had. When we reflect on everyday medieval life, what emerges most clearly is not deprivation, but durability. These lives were not defined by constant suffering, but by constant adjustment. People learned how to live within limits without losing meaning. Their world was narrow by modern standards, yet it was dense with significance. Every field, tool, and relationship carried weight. Nothing was disposable. Nothing was abstract. Life was immediate and embodied, shaped by repetition and responsibility. In listening to this quiet history, we are reminded that the past was not lived in dramatic arcs, but in steady continuation. Medieval Europe endured because its people understood how to persist without certainty, how to care without abundance, and how to find stability within change. And it is in that understanding, patient, grounded, and deeply human, that the true rhythm of medieval life continues to speak across the centuries. As this rhythm carried on, medieval life refined a careful balance between caution and trust. People trusted what had endured, methods, relationships, and customs tested by time. At the same time, they remained cautious of sudden change. This balance protected communities from reckless disruption while allowing slow adjustment when circumstances demanded it. The passing of time was marked less by milestones than by familiarity. A year was successful if it felt ordinary. Calm was valued because calm meant nothing had gone wrong. In this way, stability became its own quiet achievement. The absence of crisis was not taken for granted. It was recognized as fragile and temporary. Work continued to anchor identity. To know one's craft, one's land, or one's duties was to know oneself. Pride was taken in competence rather than distinction. Skill earned respect because it reduced risk for everyone. A reliable worker strengthened the household and, by extension, the community. As medieval people aged, their perspective deepened rather than expanded. The world did not grow larger. It grew more familiar. Experience narrowed focus toward what mattered most. Excessive ambition faded, replaced by concern for continuity: who would inherit, who would remember, who would carry on the work. Even moments of change, marriage, birth, death, were absorbed into routine. They disrupted, but they did not redefine. Life resumed because it had to. This resumption was not indifference, but resilience practiced over generations. As centuries layered upon one another, the medieval world remained cohesive because it did not depend on constant renewal. It depended on maintenance. Fields were maintained, relationships maintained, customs maintained. This maintenance required effort equal to innovation, though it rarely received recognition. When the medieval period finally gave way to new social forms, much of this maintenance culture persisted beneath emerging structures. People carried forward habits of patience and restraint into changing circumstances. The surface of society shifted, but its foundations retained medieval character for generations. To observe everyday medieval life in this way is to recognize a civilization sustained by attention, restraint, and repetition. These were not glamorous qualities, but they were effective. They allowed societies to persist through uncertainty without losing coherence. In the end, the medieval world endures not because it resisted change, but because it learned how to survive it slowly. Its people lived without promises of progress, yet they preserved continuity across centuries. And in doing so, they remind us that history's greatest strength often lies not in transformation, but in the quiet persistence of ordinary life. As this quiet persistence stretched across generations, medieval life developed an acute sensitivity to limits. People understood where effort helped and where it did not. There was little faith in forcing outcomes beyond what conditions allowed. Fields could be tended, tools repaired, prayers offered, but rain, health, and fortune ultimately lay beyond control. This awareness shaped a culture that valued measured action over excess effort. Within these limits, people cultivated reliability. To be dependable mattered more than to be exceptional. Reliability ensured that work would be done, obligations met, and crises managed without panic. It fostered trust, and trust reduced uncertainty. In a world where few safety nets existed, predictability itself became a form of security. The texture of daily life reflected this emphasis. Routines were repeated not out of habit alone, but because repetition created steadiness. Familiar movements, walking the same paths, using the same tools, speaking the same words, anchored people amid uncertainty. Routine did not dull experience. It stabilized it. As communities endured together, shared memory accumulated quietly. The knowledge of who had helped in past hardship, who had endured loss with composure, and who had failed to meet obligations shaped future interactions. Memory functioned as both guide and restraint, encouraging cooperation and discouraging behavior that threatened cohesion. Change, when it arrived, was absorbed into this framework. New practices were tested against memory. If they aligned with what had sustained life before, they endured. If not, they faded. This selective process gave medieval society a remarkable capacity to endure shocks without fragmenting. As time passed, the medieval world did not grow simpler. It grew deeper. Layers of experience, adaptation, and expectation accumulated, creating a dense fabric of social life. This depth allowed people to navigate difficulty without losing orientation. They knew where they stood because they knew where they came from. In reflecting on everyday medieval life, we encounter a form of resilience grounded in humility. People did not expect mastery over their world. They sought balance within it. They learned to live carefully, attentively, and together. That care, quiet, continuous, and shared, carried their world forward across centuries. And in its steady rhythm, the medieval experience offers a reminder that endurance itself is a profound human achievement, shaped not by spectacle, but by the patient unfolding of ordinary days. As the medieval centuries unfolded, this careful way of living produced a society deeply attuned to continuity rather than transformation. People did not measure success by novelty or expansion, but by preservation. To keep land productive, households intact, and customs recognizable was an achievement earned through discipline and restraint. The absence of disruption was itself a form of accomplishment. This orientation shaped how medieval people understood effort. Labor was constant, but it was not limitless. There were boundaries imposed by daylight, weather, physical endurance, and seasonal rhythm. Knowing when to stop was as important as knowing when to work. Exhaustion threatened survival as much as idleness. Over time, communities learned to pace themselves, conserving strength for moments when it mattered most. The land demanded respect rather than domination. Fields responded to care, not force. Overworked soil yielded less. Neglected animals grew weak, and ignored repairs multiplied into larger failures. Medieval agriculture was therefore conservative by necessity. Techniques changed slowly because mistakes carried consequences that could echo for years. Patience was learned through experience rather than instruction. This same conservatism extended to social relationships. Bonds were built gradually and dissolved reluctantly. Trust, once broken, was difficult to restore. People remembered. Memory functioned as social infrastructure, reinforcing cooperation and discouraging risk-taking that might destabilize the group. In small communities, reputation traveled faster than explanation. The household remained the central institution through which this stability was maintained. It was not merely a private space, but a unit of production, education, and authority. Children learned their future roles through observation, imitation, and repetition. Instruction was practical rather than verbal. A task was learned by doing it correctly many times under watchful eyes. Gender roles were defined but flexible in practice. While expectations existed, necessity often overrode prescription. Women worked the land, managed resources, and made decisions essential to survival. Men depended on this labor as much as on their own. Authority was negotiated daily through contribution rather than ideology. Marriage reinforced continuity rather than personal fulfillment. It bound households, consolidated labor, and ensured the transfer of knowledge across generations. Emotional attachment existed, but it was secondary to stability. Love, when it grew, was woven into routine rather than standing apart from it. Aging brought not marginalization, but recalibration. As physical strength declined, experience gained value. Older members of the community advised, mediated disputes, and preserved memory. Their presence anchored the past to the present, reminding younger generations of what had been endured before. Illness and death, though frequent, did not erase this continuity. Loss was absorbed into structure. Labor was redistributed. Children were taken in. Fields were worked despite grief. This was not emotional detachment, but collective resilience practiced over centuries. Time itself was experienced as layered rather than linear. The present was thick with memory. People lived among reminders of previous generations. Paths worn smooth by repeated use, buildings repaired countless times, fields shaped by ancestral labor. The past was not distant. It was visible. As external forces slowly intensified, trade, political consolidation, shifting economies, the medieval world adapted without abandoning its core rhythms. New demands were integrated cautiously. Change was filtered through custom, tested against memory, and accepted only when it did not threaten balance. This slow absorption of change explains why medieval society endured as long as it did. It was not rigid, but it was resistant to disruption. Its strength lay in its ability to maintain coherence under pressure. When modern observers look back on medieval Europe, they often see limitation. Yet limitation was the condition under which meaning was constructed. Life was lived close to necessity, and that closeness sharpened attention, responsibility, and care. Everyday medieval life was therefore not merely survival, but sustained human organization under constraint. People learned how to live well enough, long enough, together. And in doing so, they carried their world forward, quietly, patiently, and without knowing that future generations would one day look back and call it history. As medieval life extended across generations, one of its most defining features remained the acceptance of gradualism. Change was not resisted out of fear, but approached with caution born of experience. People understood that sudden transformation often carried unintended consequences. Stability, even when imperfect, was safer than untested improvement. This outlook shaped how medieval communities responded to opportunity. When new methods appeared, whether in farming, construction, or trade, they were observed before being embraced. Early adopters bore the risk. Others waited, watching outcomes over seasons and years. Knowledge spread slowly, but when it did, it carried legitimacy earned through survival rather than promise. The rhythm of work reinforced this patience. Days were long, but not frantic. Tasks followed sequences refined over time. There was a right moment for planting, a proper way to store grain, an established order for repairing tools. These practices were not rigid rules, but accumulated wisdom. Deviating from them invited uncertainty. The medieval understanding of effort was therefore measured. Excessive exertion could be as dangerous as neglect. Bodies were valuable resources, and injury or exhaustion carried lasting consequences. People learned to balance persistence with restraint, shaping a labor culture that prioritized endurance over speed. This balance extended to consumption. Resources were used carefully. Food was stretched, tools maintained, clothing repaired repeatedly. Waste was not immoral in theory. It was dangerous in practice. Scarcity taught efficiency long before it became a concept. Value was assigned not by abundance, but by utility. Within this framework, generosity took on practical meaning. Sharing was not idealized altruism, but mutual investment. A household that helped another during hardship strengthened future support networks. Assistance was remembered. Aid given today could mean survival tomorrow. Community functioned as insurance against uncertainty. Social roles reinforced this interdependence. No individual could fulfill every need. Farmers relied on craftsmen. Craftsmen relied on traders. Traders relied on stable routes and local production. Even the most self-sufficient households depended on wider networks. This reliance fostered humility rather than independence. Conflict threatened this balance and was therefore managed carefully. Open violence disrupted labor and fractured trust. Resolution was preferred, even when imperfect. Compromise preserved continuity. Justice aimed less at punishment than at restoring function. Order mattered because disorder multiplied vulnerability. Over time, these practices produced communities skilled in adaptation without rupture. When faced with recurring crises, poor harvests, disease, political upheaval, people relied on familiar responses. They reduced consumption, shared labor, and leaned on collective memory. Survival strategies were activated not through planning, but through habit. The medieval relationship with authority reflected this pragmatism. Power was tolerated so long as it maintained balance. Excessive extraction of labor or resources weakened the system itself. While hierarchy was accepted, its legitimacy depended on restraint. Authority that ignored practical limits faced quiet resistance. As centuries passed, the accumulated effect of countless small adjustments slowly reshaped society. Population density fluctuated. Towns expanded and contracted. Trade networks thickened. Yet for most people, daily life remained recognizable. The same tools were used, the same paths walked, the same rhythms followed. This continuity created a sense of permanence that buffered anxiety. Life was uncertain, but familiar. People knew what was expected of them and what they could expect in return. That predictability, however limited, offered psychological stability. The medieval sense of belonging was rooted in this predictability. Identity emerged from participation rather than self-definition. To belong was to contribute, to be known, and to be remembered. Individual distinction mattered less than reliability. The group endured because its members understood their roles. As the medieval world approached moments of transformation that later historians would mark as significant, ordinary people continued their lives largely unchanged. Labels such as "End of the Middle Ages" held no meaning at ground level. Life did not announce its transitions. Instead, it continued, fields tended, tools repaired, households sustained. Change arrived quietly, embedded within routine. The medieval world did not end. It gradually evolved, carrying forward habits forged under constraint. In observing this long continuity, we gain insight into a form of resilience rarely celebrated. Medieval society endured not through innovation alone, nor through force, but through disciplined patience. Its people learned how to live within limits without surrendering meaning. And it is this ability to persist carefully, collectively, and attentively that defines everyday life in medieval Europe more clearly than any single event or era ever could. As the medieval world persisted through centuries of repetition, it cultivated a distinctive relationship with uncertainty that differed sharply from later periods. Uncertainty was not treated as a problem to be solved, but as a condition to be managed. People did not expect clarity about the future. Instead, they prepared for variability, knowing that stability was temporary and disruption inevitable. This expectation shaped planning at every level of life. Preparation focused not on long-term growth, but on short-term survival reinforced over time. Granaries were filled when possible. Tools were repaired before they broke. Relationships were maintained even when inconvenient. Redundancy was valued. A household that relied on a single source of food or labor placed itself at risk. The medieval mindset, therefore, favored resilience over efficiency. Systems were designed to endure stress rather than maximize output. Fields were rested, not exhausted. Labor was distributed, not concentrated. Skills were shared across households, ensuring that knowledge did not disappear with a single death or departure. What modern observers might view as inefficiency functioned as protection. This approach extended to emotional life as well. Expectations were moderated to reduce vulnerability. Joy was welcomed, but not relied upon. Loss was anticipated, though never welcomed. This emotional calibration allowed people to absorb shock without collapsing. Grief was real, but it unfolded within structures that guided behavior and restored routine. Ritual played a crucial role in this restoration. Repetition of familiar acts, prayers, seasonal observances, communal meals, provided continuity when circumstances changed. Ritual did not eliminate suffering, but it gave it a place. It marked time, acknowledged loss, and reaffirmed belonging. In doing so, it stabilized both individuals and communities. The medieval experience of labor reinforced this stabilizing function. Work was not only productive but orienting. It structured the day, the season, and the year. Even in moments of hardship, work continued where possible, offering a sense of agency when outcomes were uncertain. To work was to participate in survival regardless of result. This emphasis on participation rather than outcome shaped moral judgment. Effort mattered more than success. A failed harvest after honest labor did not carry shame. Neglect did. Responsibility was defined by commitment, not by results beyond control. This distinction allowed communities to maintain cohesion even in failure. As medieval societies aged, they accumulated layers of adaptation that shaped collective behavior. Practices that had once been responses to crisis became normalized. Scarcity shaped cuisine. Danger shaped architecture. Loss shaped kinship networks. What began as reaction hardened into structure, forming a way of life oriented toward endurance. Over time, these structures created a sense of grounded realism. Illusions about constant improvement found little footing. People understood that conditions fluctuated. They prepared for decline as carefully as they hoped for abundance. This realism discouraged despair because hardship was expected, and it discouraged complacency because stability was fragile. The medieval relationship with authority reflected this realism as well. Power was judged less by rhetoric than by its effects on survival. Leaders who disrupted balance faced resistance, often subtle but persistent. Authority that preserved order earned loyalty, even when imperfect. Stability outweighed ideal governance. As trade expanded and political landscapes shifted, this underlying realism shaped adaptation. New opportunities were evaluated through the lens of risk. Prosperity was welcomed, but not assumed permanent. Households avoided dependence on novelty alone. Diversity of skills and resources remained essential. In this way, medieval life functioned as a continuous negotiation between hope and caution. People hoped for favorable conditions, but they planned for adversity. This dual orientation prevented extremes. Optimism did not lead to recklessness, and pessimism did not lead to paralysis. When viewed across centuries, this balance explains the endurance of medieval society. It survived not because it avoided crisis, but because it integrated crisis into expectation. Hardship did not shatter meaning. It confirmed the need for structure, cooperation, and restraint. Everyday medieval life was therefore not static repetition, but disciplined continuity. It adjusted without abandoning itself. It changed without losing orientation. As people lived close to necessity, and in doing so, developed a form of resilience rooted in humility. They did not imagine themselves as building a civilization. They imagined themselves as maintaining life. Yet through that maintenance, day after day, generation after generation, they sustained a world capable of carrying history forward. And it is in this sustained effort, quiet and unrecorded, that the medieval experience reveals its deepest significance. A testament to the human capacity to endure uncertainty without surrendering order, meaning, or care. As medieval life continued its slow passage through time, one of its most enduring qualities remained the discipline of maintenance. Civilization, at the level of everyday existence, was not built through moments of creation alone, but through constant repair. Roofs were mended, tools sharpened, paths cleared, and relationships tended. Nothing stayed whole without attention. Neglect accumulated quietly, and its consequences arrived without warning. This awareness shaped behavior deeply. People learned that survival depended less on ambition than on care. A well-maintained field yielded more than an expanded one left untended. A repaired tool extended years of labor. A relationship sustained through effort could provide aid during crisis. Maintenance became a moral practice as much as a practical one. The medieval household embodied this principle. It was not a static structure, but a living system requiring continuous adjustment. Supplies had to be monitored, labor redistributed, and roles adapted as circumstances changed. Illness, aging, or loss altered the balance, and households responded by reorganizing rather than collapsing. Flexibility within continuity was essential. This flexibility did not imply freedom from hierarchy. Authority existed, but it functioned within limits shaped by necessity. Those who led, whether within households, guilds, or communities, were expected to preserve stability. Leadership was evaluated by its ability to sustain function rather than impose vision. Excessive control threatened resilience by reducing adaptability. In this environment, knowledge was inseparable from practice. People learned not through abstraction, but through repeated engagement with the same tasks across years. Expertise was not announced. It was recognized. A person known to repair tools well, manage livestock effectively, or mediate disputes competently earned trust gradually. Reputation replaced certification. This emphasis on practical knowledge fostered humility. Even skilled individuals remained aware of uncertainty. Experience taught that conditions could change suddenly and expertise had limits. This awareness discouraged arrogance and encouraged consultation. Decisions were often collective, informed by multiple perspectives grounded in lived experience. Seasonal repetition reinforced this collaborative orientation. Tasks returned each year, but conditions never did so identically. Small variations demanded judgment rather than rote execution. Over time, people developed an intuitive sense for adjustment, when to plant earlier, when to wait, when to conserve effort. This intuition was the product of accumulated observation rather than instruction. The medieval approach to time supported this mode of living. Time was not divided into units for optimization, but experienced as flow. Days were shaped by light, weather, and necessity. Urgency arose from circumstance, not schedule. This allowed attention to remain focused on conditions rather than abstraction. As centuries passed, the accumulation of maintained systems created resilience that appeared effortless from within. Communities endured shocks because they had practiced continuity for generations. Their strength lay not in innovation alone, but in the capacity to absorb strain without fracturing. Even conflict was managed through this lens. Disputes threatened maintenance by diverting energy and fracturing cooperation. Resolution, therefore, prioritized restoration over victory. Compromise preserved function. Memory preserved accountability. Stability was regained not by erasing conflict, but by reintegrating it. The medieval world's relationship with scarcity further reinforced these habits. Scarcity was not exceptional. It was expected. Abundance, when it occurred, was temporary. This expectation discouraged dependency on favorable conditions. People prepared for decline even during prosperity, maintaining reserves of both material and social capital. As economic and political structures evolved slowly around them, ordinary people continued to orient their lives around maintenance. New opportunities were integrated cautiously. Trade expanded, but subsistence remained central. Markets offered possibility, but fields offered security. Diversification reduced risk. This balance between engagement and restraint allowed medieval society to persist without losing coherence. It did not resist change outright, but it filtered change through existing structures of care and responsibility. Innovations that supported maintenance endured. Those that undermined it faded. In this sense, everyday medieval life functioned as a long experiment in sustainability under constraint. People did not seek endless growth. They sought continuity. They aimed to preserve what worked, repair what failed, and endure what could not be changed. Their world was fragile, but it was not chaotic. Order was produced through effort rather than assumption. Stability was earned repeatedly rather than guaranteed. This demanded constant attention, patience, and cooperation. When modern observers search for meaning in medieval history, they often look to transformation, political shifts, technological change, intellectual movements. Yet beneath these developments lay a deeper continuity sustained by ordinary people performing unremarkable tasks with remarkable persistence. It is within this quiet labor of maintenance, carried out day after day, across centuries, that medieval Europe sustained itself. Not through spectacle, but through care. Not through speed, but through steadiness. And in recognizing this, we come closer to understanding the true nature of medieval life. A civilization held together not by grand design, but by the disciplined, patient continuation of ordinary human responsibility. As the medieval world carried on through long stretches of relative continuity, its people developed a finely tuned awareness of proportion. Effort, expectation, and reward were understood to exist in delicate balance. Too much hope invited disappointment. Too little effort invited collapse. Life required constant calibration, guided by experience rather than abstraction. This sense of proportion shaped how people related to ambition. Aspirations were not absent, but they were constrained by realism. To improve one's situation meant securing reliability, not pursuing expansion for its own sake. A slightly larger harvest, a sturdier home, a dependable trade, these were meaningful gains because they reduced vulnerability. Excess, by contrast, threatened imbalance. The medieval understanding of security was therefore cumulative. Safety was not achieved through a single achievement, but through layers of preparation. Food stored, relationships maintained, skills diversified. Each layer added resilience. No single measure was sufficient on its own. Survival depended on overlap. This layered approach extended to social life. Households did not exist in isolation. Kinship networks overlapped with neighborly obligations, trade relationships, and religious affiliation. These connections formed a web of mutual dependence. When one strand weakened, others compensated. The system endured because it was redundant. Such redundancy required patience. Relationships were not transactional in the short term. Favor was extended without immediate return, trusting that memory would preserve balance over time. This trust was not naive. It was tested repeatedly. Communities remembered who honored obligations and who failed to do so. Trust accumulated slowly and dissolved reluctantly. The medieval experience of hardship reinforced this patience. Crises unfolded over months rather than moments. Hunger crept rather than struck. Illness lingered. Recovery was gradual. People learned to endure long uncertainty without resolution. This endurance shaped emotional stamina. Anxiety existed, but it was moderated by familiarity with prolonged strain. Time under these conditions felt expansive. Without constant measurement, days blended into seasons. Urgency arose from necessity rather than schedule. This allowed attention to remain focused on immediate conditions rather than distant outcomes. People lived in the present not as a philosophy, but as a necessity. As generations replaced one another, this orientation toward the present did not prevent foresight. Instead, foresight took the form of preparation rather than prediction. People prepared for hardship without claiming to foresee it. This humility toward the future preserved adaptability. Material culture reflected this mindset. Objects were designed to last, not to impress. Tools were heavy, simple, and reparable. Clothing prioritized durability. Homes favored shelter over display. Aesthetic choices were guided by function, and beauty emerged from familiarity rather than novelty. Even spiritual life followed this pattern. Faith offered continuity more than explanation. Ritual repeated because repetition anchored meaning. Questions existed, but answers were less important than participation. Belonging mattered more than certainty. In a world of unpredictability, shared belief provided structure. As medieval societies encountered new pressures, growing populations, expanding trade, political consolidation, the habits forged under constraint shaped response. Expansion was approached cautiously. Growth was balanced against stability. New opportunities were integrated slowly, tested against lived experience. This cautious integration explains why medieval life often appears unchanged across long periods. Change occurred, but it was absorbed incrementally. Adjustments accumulated quietly. From within, life felt continuous even as structures evolved. This continuity supported psychological endurance. People understood their lives as part of an ongoing pattern rather than isolated trajectories. Individual hardship felt less isolating when framed within collective experience. Suffering was shared, remembered, and contextualized. The medieval sense of legacy reflected this framing. Legacy was not about recognition, but about preservation. To leave a household intact, land workable, and reputation intact was success. The future mattered, but it was approached through stewardship rather than ambition. As we observe this long endurance, the medieval world emerges as neither stagnant nor fragile. It was dynamic within limits, adaptable without haste. Its strength lay in its refusal to outrun its capacity. It moved at the speed of care. Ordinary people sustained this balance through daily decisions: when to work harder, when to conserve energy, when to help, when to wait. These decisions rarely entered records, yet they determined survival more reliably than dramatic events. In this sense, medieval Europe was built not by momentum, but by moderation. Its people learned how to persist by avoiding extremes, maintaining relationships, and respecting limits imposed by environment and circumstance. And it is through this disciplined moderation, quietly practiced across centuries, that everyday medieval life achieved its enduring resilience. As medieval life extended across generations shaped by moderation and care, a distinct relationship with memory continued to deepen. Memory was not archived in books for most people. It lived in habits, stories, and places. Knowledge of past hardship was carried forward through practice rather than narration. A field left fallow too long, a path avoided after flooding, a boundary respected because conflict once followed its crossing. These memories were embedded in action. This living memory functioned as a guide. People did not need to explain why certain choices were made. They knew because they had seen the consequences before, or because someone older had shown them. Memory narrowed options, but it also reduced risk. It offered a map through uncertainty based on experience rather than speculation. The medieval approach to learning reflected this reliance on memory. Instruction favored demonstration over explanation. Children absorbed skills by watching, repeating, and correcting mistakes under supervision. Learning was cumulative and slow, but durable. What was learned endured because it was practiced daily. Forgetting was less likely when knowledge was woven into routine. This embedded learning shaped adaptability. When conditions shifted, people did not invent entirely new systems. They modified existing ones. A tool might be adapted, a practice adjusted, a role redefined. Change occurred through recombination rather than replacement. Familiar elements were rearranged to meet new demands. The rhythm of this adaptation was slow enough to preserve coherence. Communities adjusted without losing their sense of identity. New practices were evaluated through their impact on existing relationships and routines. If a change disrupted balance, it was resisted. If it reinforced stability, it was retained. This selective process shaped the medieval economy as well. Markets expanded, but subsistence remained central. Trade supplemented survival. It did not replace it. People avoided total dependence on external systems they could not control. Diversity of resources offered protection. A household that grew food, practiced a craft, and maintained social ties reduced vulnerability. Economic life, therefore, emphasized continuity over accumulation. Wealth, where it existed, was stored in land, tools, or relationships rather than abstract forms. These assets were tangible and maintainable. They could be repaired, shared, or passed on. This grounded form of security aligned with the medieval preference for durability. As communities navigated periods of strain, cooperation intensified. Labor was shared during harvest, construction, and crisis. Assistance was expected and reciprocated over time. These cooperative practices were not idealized. They were practical responses to necessity. Survival depended on shared effort. The medieval sense of fairness emerged from this cooperation. Fairness was not equality, but balance. Contributions were weighed against capacity. Those who could give more were expected to do so. Those who could not were supported. The system aimed not to eliminate difference, but to prevent collapse. This emphasis on balance shaped responses to misfortune. Loss was acknowledged, but it did not excuse withdrawal from obligation indefinitely. Recovery was communal. People were expected to re-enter routine when possible. Routine restored function and dignity. It signaled survival. As centuries passed, the cumulative effect of these practices produced societies that were resilient without being rigid. They absorbed shock through adjustment rather than rupture. Their stability was not imposed from above, but sustained from within. The medieval world's endurance was therefore not accidental. It was cultivated through countless small decisions guided by experience, memory, and restraint. People learned when to act, when to wait, and when to accept limits. This discernment allowed them to persist under conditions that offered little margin for error. When viewed from a distance, medieval life may appear constrained. Yet within those constraints, people exercised agency through care. They chose how to respond, how to cooperate, and how to maintain balance. Their world was shaped not by unlimited choice, but by meaningful responsibility. This responsibility extended beyond the present moment. People understood themselves as part of a chain extending backward and forward. They inherited practices refined by ancestors and passed them on with modification. Life was stewardship rather than ownership. As later transformations unfolded, these habits did not vanish. They influenced how new systems were built and understood. The medieval experience continued to shape expectations long after the period itself had passed. In listening to everyday medieval life unfold at this pace, we encounter a form of history grounded in persistence rather than spectacle. It is a story carried by ordinary people who learned how to live carefully, collectively, and attentively within limits they did not choose. Their achievement was not the conquest of uncertainty, but coexistence with it. And through that coexistence, they sustained a world that endured for centuries, quietly, steadily, and without acclaim. As the medieval centuries progressed, everyday life continued to be shaped by an ongoing negotiation between endurance and adaptation. What sustained communities was not the absence of strain, but their ability to absorb it without losing cohesion. This capacity was not inherited automatically. It was learned, reinforced, and practiced daily. One of the most important skills medieval people developed was discernment. They learned to distinguish between hardship that required action and hardship that required patience. Not every difficulty could be solved, and attempting to solve the unsolvable often worsened conditions. This awareness guided decisions large and small: when to replant after a failed harvest, when to conserve food rather than redistribute it, when to seek help and when to endure quietly. Such discernment depended on experience rather than instruction. It was cultivated over years of observing outcomes, remembering past mistakes, and adjusting behavior accordingly. Communities accumulated this knowledge collectively, passing it on through example. Wisdom resided not in doctrine, but in restraint. The physical environment reinforced this restraint. Medieval landscapes bore the marks of careful use rather than transformation. Fields followed natural contours. Roads traced the easiest paths rather than the shortest. Settlements grew where water, shelter, and soil permitted. The environment set limits that could not be ignored without consequence. This relationship with land shaped attitudes toward ownership. Land was held, worked, and inherited, but it was not endlessly exploited. Overuse reduced future survival. Stewardship was not a moral abstraction. It was practical foresight. A field ruined by impatience did not recover quickly, and its failure affected more than one household. These realities influenced how medieval people thought about responsibility. Responsibility extended beyond the individual and even beyond the present. Actions were judged by their long-term impact on household and community. Short-term gain at the expense of future stability carried social consequences, even if it escaped immediate punishment. The communal nature of this responsibility shaped social expectations. Independence, as later societies would understand it, held little value. Self-sufficiency was admired only insofar as it supported collective resilience. No household truly stood alone. Interdependence was not weakness. It was insurance. This interdependence influenced emotional life as well. Joy was shared, grief communal, and anxiety diffused through routine interaction. People rarely faced hardship in isolation. While privacy existed, suffering was visible and acknowledged. The presence of others provided both support and accountability. The medieval approach to storytelling reflected this collective orientation. Stories were not primarily vehicles for entertainment, but for instruction. They conveyed caution, reinforced norms, and preserved memory. Tales of past disaster or survival were retold not to dwell on fear, but to remind listeners of what endurance required. As time passed, these stories became part of the social fabric. They shaped expectation, informed behavior, and reinforced continuity. History was not separate from life. It was embedded within it, shaping choices in the present. The pace of medieval life allowed for reflection, though not in abstract terms. Reflection occurred through comparison. This year to last, this harvest to the one before, this winter to a remembered hardship. Patterns were recognized through repetition. Understanding emerged gradually without formal analysis. As pressures mounted in later medieval centuries, through demographic change, economic strain, and environmental fluctuation, this pattern-based understanding proved essential. Communities relied on accumulated memory to navigate uncertainty. They adjusted planting times, redistributed labor, and renegotiated obligations based on what had worked before. Even when these adjustments failed, the process itself reinforced cohesion. Shared effort mattered. Participation affirmed belonging, even in defeat. People judged one another not solely by outcome, but by commitment to collective survival. This emphasis on participation shaped moral evaluation. Neglect was condemned more harshly than failure. Effort signaled responsibility. To try, even unsuccessfully, preserve trust. This ethic allowed communities to endure repeated disappointment without fracturing. As medieval life continued, it maintained this delicate balance between realism and hope. People did not expect relief from hardship, but they did expect continuity. Tomorrow would resemble today closely enough to plan for it. That resemblance provided stability amid uncertainty. Over generations, this expectation became self-reinforcing. Because people planned for continuity, they created it. Structures endured because they were maintained. Customs survived because they were practiced. Memory persisted because it was used. The medieval world was therefore sustained less by progress than by preservation. Its people did not seek to overcome limitation, but to live within it skillfully. This skill was learned slowly, passed carefully, and applied daily. In observing this long unfolding of ordinary life, we see a civilization shaped not by grand vision, but by careful attention. Every choice mattered because margins were narrow. Every relationship mattered because survival was shared. This is the quiet power of everyday medieval life. A world maintained through patience, cooperation, and disciplined care. Its endurance was not accidental. It was earned, day by day, through choices that favored balance over excess and continuity over disruption. And it is through this steady practice of living within limits that medieval Europe sustained itself for centuries, leaving behind not only monuments and records, but a deep legacy of human resilience grounded in ordinary experience. As everyday medieval life unfolded across long stretches of time, it cultivated a form of social intelligence rooted in attentiveness rather than abstraction. People learned not through theories of society, but through constant engagement with one another. They understood temperament, reliability, and limits because they observed them daily. Social knowledge was practical, immediate, and deeply contextual. This attentiveness shaped how cooperation functioned. Help was offered not indiscriminately, but with awareness of circumstance. Communities recognized who was struggling temporarily and who had withdrawn from obligation. Support was extended where it preserved balance, not where it encouraged dependency. This judgment was imperfect, but it reflected a shared effort to sustain the whole. The medieval sense of fairness emerged from this attentiveness. Fairness was not uniform treatment, but proportional response. Needs were weighed against capacity. Expectations adjusted according to circumstance. Justice, as lived experience, aimed less at equality than at stability. A decision was fair if it restored function and preserved cohesion. This functional view of fairness shaped conflict resolution. Disputes were addressed with the goal of reintegration rather than exclusion. Even when punishment occurred, it aimed to return individuals to participation. Permanent exclusion weakened the group by reducing labor, trust, and mutual support. Communities preferred repair to removal whenever possible. The importance of reintegration extended to moments of failure. A poor decision or mistake did not necessarily define a person. Reputation could recover through consistent effort over time. This possibility of restoration encouraged continued participation even after error. Preserved hope without denying accountability. Time itself facilitated this restorative process. Without rapid judgment or constant record-keeping, behavior was evaluated across long spans. A single failure mattered less than a pattern. Consistency carried weight. This temporal perspective allowed communities to absorb disruption without immediate rupture. The medieval relationship with authority also reflected this long view. Authority figures were tolerated when they demonstrated restraint and responsiveness. Power was accepted as part of order, but it was monitored through consequence rather than ideology. Excessive demands produced quiet resistance, delayed labor, withdrawal of cooperation, or migration, rather than open rebellion. This form of resistance was subtle but effective. It preserved social fabric while signaling limits. Authority that ignored these signals weakened its own base. Stability depended on responsiveness, even within hierarchy. The rhythms of daily labor reinforced this balance. Work demanded cooperation across households and seasons. Tasks were interconnected. One failure affected many. This interdependence encouraged negotiation rather than domination. Survival depended on maintaining working relationships. As medieval societies encountered periods of prolonged strain, this negotiation intensified. Scarcity forced reassessment of obligation. Who could give more, who needed support, and where effort should be concentrated became urgent questions. These decisions were rarely formalized. They emerged through discussion, observation, and adjustment. The emotional life of medieval communities reflected this shared negotiation. Anxiety was diffused through routine interaction. People spoke less of abstract fear and more of immediate concern. Worry was shared, normalized, and managed collectively. This reduced isolation even when solutions were unavailable. The presence of routine itself provided reassurance. Familiar tasks repeated under new conditions offered continuity. Work resumed after disruption not because conditions improved, but because routine stabilized identity. To continue working was to affirm belonging. As generations passed, these patterns of negotiation and restoration formed a durable social fabric. People learned how to live together under constraint. They developed expectations shaped by experience rather than aspiration. This realism did not eliminate conflict, but it contained it. The medieval world therefore functioned through constant, small-scale adjustment. It did not rely on centralized solutions for everyday problems. Instead, it depended on local knowledge, memory, and relationship. This decentralized resilience allowed communities to endure variability without waiting for external intervention. Over time, this mode of living shaped character. People valued steadiness over brilliance, reliability over ambition, patience over speed. These values were not taught explicitly. They were reinforced by consequence. Those who embodied them endured. Those who did not struggled to find support. As the medieval period approached moments of structural transformation, these values persisted beneath emerging forms. New systems were layered atop old habits. Even when institutions changed, expectations of care, restraint, and participation remained influential. This continuity explains why medieval life cannot be understood solely through political or economic shifts. Its essence lay in the everyday management of uncertainty through shared effort. The true structure of medieval society existed not in documents or monuments, but in repeated acts of cooperation. Everyday medieval life was therefore an ongoing practice rather than a fixed state. It required attention, negotiation, and adaptation. Its stability was not passive. It was actively maintained. In recognizing this, we see medieval Europe not as a world defined by limitation alone, but as one shaped by disciplined coexistence with uncertainty. As people learned how to live together carefully, within narrow margins, without surrendering coherence or meaning. That achievement, quiet, collective, and sustained, remains one of the most enduring legacies of the medieval world. As medieval life carried on through this long practice of cooperation and restraint, it gradually produced a particular sense of moral clarity rooted not in ideals, but in consequence. Right and wrong were understood less through abstract principles and more through their effects on survival. Actions were judged by what they sustained or endangered. A choice that weakened the household, disrupted labor, or fractured trust carried moral weight because it threatened continuity. This consequence-based morality shaped daily behavior in subtle ways. Honesty mattered because deception undermined cooperation. Reliability mattered because uncertainty increased risk. Generosity mattered because isolation invited collapse. These values were reinforced not by instruction alone, but by lived experience. People saw what happened when they were ignored. Such moral clarity did not produce uniform behavior. People still failed, acted selfishly, or misjudged circumstances. Yet the framework within which behavior was evaluated remained consistent. Redemption was possible through effort and time. Repeated harm without repair led to exclusion, but exclusion was a last resort. The goal remained preservation of the group. This framework extended into how medieval people understood obligation. Obligation was reciprocal, not contractual. It evolved through interaction rather than agreement. A person owed labor because others had labored before them. A household received help because it would help in turn. Memory enforced these obligations more effectively than written rules. The absence of formal documentation in many aspects of life did not imply disorder. On the contrary, it demanded attentiveness. People remembered who owed what, who had helped whom, and when balance had been restored. This living record functioned continuously, shaping expectation and behavior. The medieval relationship with scarcity sharpened this attentiveness. Scarcity revealed interdependence. When resources tightened, the margin for error narrowed. Cooperation became more visible, and failure to cooperate more costly. Scarcity exposed the importance of trust built during abundance. In these moments, leadership was tested. Those who guided communities through scarcity earned lasting respect. Leadership did not require brilliance, but steadiness. Calm decision-making, willingness to share burden, and ability to listen mattered more than authority alone. Leaders who preserved cohesion succeeded even when outcomes were poor. As medieval societies experienced repeated cycles of strain and recovery, they refined these expectations. People learned which behaviors sustained collective effort and which undermined it. Over time, norms solidified around what worked. Tradition, in this sense, was not static inheritance but accumulated trial. The physical spaces of medieval life reflected this accumulation. Villages were shaped by repeated adjustment. Paths shifted with use. Buildings were altered incrementally. Boundaries moved in response to need. The landscape itself recorded decisions made over generations, embodying memory in material form. This material memory reinforced social memory. People moved through spaces shaped by past labor, reminding them of continuity. They lived among evidence of endurance. This presence of the past grounded identity, offering perspective during hardship. Difficulties had been faced before, and life had continued. The medieval understanding of time supported this grounding. Time was not experienced as a march toward improvement, but as a series of cycles punctuated by variation. The past was not left behind. It informed the present. The future was not imagined as radically different. It was anticipated as another turn of the cycle. This cyclical perception reduced anxiety about change. While uncertainty remained, it was familiar. People did not expect stability to last indefinitely, nor collapse to be permanent. This tempered emotional extremes and encouraged perseverance. As new influences entered medieval Europe, expanded trade, political consolidation, shifting economic patterns, this cyclical understanding moderated response. Change was not rejected outright, but it was interpreted through familiar frameworks. New practices were adapted to old rhythms where possible. This adaptation was uneven and sometimes painful. Not all changes could be absorbed without loss. Yet even loss was processed through existing structures of meaning. Grief had a place. Disruption had precedent. Recovery was possible. The medieval world's endurance lay in this capacity to contextualize experience. People did not face hardship as isolated individuals, but as members of a continuum. Their lives were chapters in an ongoing story rather than standalone narratives. This perspective shaped how people approached aging and death. Life was finite, but its meaning extended beyond the individual. One's work contributed to something lasting. This offered comfort amid uncertainty. To maintain continuity was to participate in something larger than oneself. As everyday medieval life continued along this path, it demonstrated a form of wisdom grounded in humility. People accepted that they could not control outcomes, but they could control effort, care, and cooperation. These choices mattered. Through countless such choices, rarely recorded, often unnoticed, medieval people sustained their world. Not through conquest of uncertainty, but through coexistence with it. Not through rapid transformation, but through patient adjustment. And in this steady coexistence, they forged a durable social fabric capable of withstanding centuries of strain. That fabric, woven from ordinary lives lived attentively and collectively, remains the truest legacy of medieval Europe. As medieval life persisted through this long cultivation of balance and consequence, it gradually shaped a distinctive sense of belonging rooted in presence rather than aspiration. People belonged not because they chose to, but because they were woven into place, labor, and memory. Identity was not constructed. It was inherited, practiced, and reinforced daily through participation. This belonging carried obligations that were rarely questioned. To be part of a community was to accept its demands as well as its protections. Work, assistance, restraint, and cooperation were not optional virtues. They were conditions of inclusion. In return, belonging offered security that could not be achieved alone. This exchange formed the foundation of medieval social life. Because belonging was enacted rather than declared, it required visibility. People were known through their actions over time. A reputation formed slowly and endured stubbornly. Consistency mattered more than brilliance. A person who showed up repeatedly, fulfilled obligations, and respected custom earned trust that no single act could secure. This visibility shaped behavior in subtle ways. Choices were made with awareness of how they would be remembered. Reputation functioned as a form of social capital, influencing access to help, cooperation, and opportunity. Carelessness carried consequences beyond the immediate moment. Memory extended accountability across time. The medieval emphasis on memory reinforced caution. People avoided unnecessary risk not out of fear, but out of responsibility to others. A failed gamble could burden the household or community. Restraint protected not only the individual, but the network of relationships on which survival depended. As a result, medieval life favored predictability over excitement. Routine offered reassurance. Familiar patterns reduced uncertainty. This preference did not eliminate creativity, but it shaped its expression. Innovation occurred within accepted boundaries. New methods were integrated gradually, ensuring they did not destabilize existing systems. This gradualism extended to emotional life. Feelings were not suppressed, but they were regulated. Excessive display threatened balance. Emotional restraint allowed people to continue functioning amid strain. Grief was expressed, then absorbed back into routine. Joy was celebrated, then released. Life resumed because it had to. The rhythm of seasons reinforced this emotional regulation. Hardship was expected at certain times. Relief arrived at others. This predictability moderated reaction. People learned to endure winter knowing that spring followed, even if its arrival was uncertain. Cycles offered hope without illusion. As medieval people aged, their relationship with belonging deepened. Older individuals became living repositories of memory. Their presence linked past and present, offering perspective shaped by endurance. Authority flowed from experience rather than force. Elders guided through example more than instruction. The presence of elders also reinforced continuity across generations. Children grew up surrounded by reminders of longevity. Survival was visible. This visibility tempered fear of hardship. People had seen endurance embodied. They knew that life, though difficult, could persist. As medieval societies encountered gradual transformation, these patterns of belonging shaped response. Change threatened not only material conditions but identity itself. Communities evaluated change by its effect on cohesion. Practices that preserved belonging endured. Those that fragmented it faced resistance. This resistance was rarely ideological. It was practical. A change that disrupted labor coordination, undermined trust, or weakened obligation threatened survival. Such changes were rejected not because they were new, but because they were dangerous. Conversely, changes that reinforced belonging were embraced. New tools that reduced strain, new practices that improved cooperation, or new arrangements that strengthened stability found acceptance. Belonging acted as a filter through which innovation passed. This filtering process explains the slow pace of visible change in medieval life. Communities moved deliberately, prioritizing cohesion over novelty. They adjusted without abandoning themselves. This allowed them to absorb external pressure without losing internal structure. The medieval world's resilience lay in this capacity to preserve belonging under strain. People remained connected even when conditions worsened. This connection provided emotional support, material assistance, and moral orientation. It transformed survival from an individual challenge into a collective endeavor. As centuries passed, this collective orientation shaped expectations about life itself. fulfillment was found not in distinction, but in participation. Meaning emerged from contribution rather than achievement. To belong fully was to live responsibly within one's limits. In observing everyday medieval life through this lens, we encounter a society sustained by relationships rather than systems. Its strength lay not in centralized control, but in mutual recognition. People knew one another, relied on one another, and endured together. This endurance did not erase hardship. It made it survivable. It framed suffering within shared experience and continuity. It allowed people to face uncertainty without isolation. Through countless ordinary acts, showing up to work, sharing resources, respecting limits, medieval people maintained a world that could withstand centuries of strain. Their lives were not extraordinary, but their persistence was. And in that persistence, lived quietly and collectively, the medieval world reveals one of its most enduring truths, that belonging, carefully maintained, can sustain human life even under the most demanding conditions. As medieval life carried forward through this deep sense of belonging and continuity, it gradually shaped how people understood individuality itself. Identity was not conceived as something separate from community, but as something expressed through role. A person was known by what they did, how they behaved, and how reliably they fulfilled expectations. Individual worth was inseparable from contribution. This understanding did not erase personality or difference. People were recognized for temperament, skill, and disposition. Yet these differences were meaningful only within the context of shared responsibility. Individuality existed, but it was relational rather than autonomous. One's actions gained meaning through their effect on others. This relational identity shaped ambition. Ambition that strengthened the household or community was accepted. Ambition that disrupted balance was discouraged. Success was measured by stability rather than ascent. A person who improved conditions for others earned respect. One who sought advantage at collective expense risked isolation. The medieval approach to reputation reflected this balance. Reputation was cumulative and slow to change, could not be manufactured quickly, nor erased easily. Time tested character. Consistency mattered more than intention. This long horizon encouraged patience and discouraged impulsive behavior. Patience itself became a social virtue. Waiting for harvest, for recovery, for opportunity was not passive. It required endurance, attention, and restraint. People learned to wait without disengaging, to remain present and prepared even when action was delayed. This capacity to endure uncertainty without withdrawal sustained communities through prolonged strain. As medieval people navigated repeated cycles of hardship and recovery, they developed a practical philosophy of acceptance. Acceptance did not mean surrender. It meant recognizing limits and adjusting behavior accordingly. Energy was directed where it could have effect, conserved where it could not. This philosophy shaped how medieval societies responded to misfortune. Blame was less emphasized than adaptation. When disaster struck, the immediate question was not why it had happened, but how life could continue. This orientation reduced paralysis and encouraged collective problem solving. Even when explanations were sought through faith or tradition, action followed quickly. Fields were replanted, homes were repaired, labor was reorganized. Meaning and response were not mutually exclusive. They coexisted, each supporting the other. The medieval sense of time reinforced this coexistence. Time was not scarce in the modern sense, but it was precious. Days were full, seasons demanding. There was little room for waste. This attentiveness to time encouraged focus on what mattered most: food, shelter, health, and relationship. Leisure, when it occurred, was woven into life rather than separated from it. Festivals followed labor. Rest followed effort. These moments did not interrupt routine. They completed it. They reaffirmed connection and restored energy, reinforcing the cycle rather than escaping it. As medieval communities persisted, they developed an intuitive understanding of thresholds, points beyond which strain became dangerous. They learned how much land could be worked, how much labor demanded, how much hardship endured before cohesion weakened. This awareness guided decision-making even without formal calculation. Leadership within this context required sensitivity rather than command. Those who recognized thresholds preserved stability. Those who ignored them risked collapse. Authority that listened endured. Authority that extracted without regard faced quiet erosion of support. The medieval world, therefore, depended on constant calibration. Balance was not achieved once and maintained automatically. It required ongoing adjustment in response to changing conditions. This work was invisible but essential. It was carried out through conversation, observation, and shared experience. As centuries passed, this calibration allowed medieval societies to absorb gradual transformation without losing identity. New practices were aligned with existing rhythms. New demands were negotiated within established relationships. Change occurred, but it did not sever continuity. This capacity for alignment explains the persistence of medieval structures long after their origins were forgotten. Practices endured because they worked, not because they were ancient. Tradition functioned as accumulated success rather than inherited rule. In this way, everyday medieval life reveals a form of intelligence often overlooked: the intelligence of lived adaptation. People learned how to live together under constraint, how to distribute burden, and how to maintain cohesion without constant instruction. Their world was not static. It moved slowly, deliberately, guided by memory and necessity. Its people did not seek mastery over their circumstances, but accommodation within them. This accommodation required effort, care, and collective commitment. Through this commitment, medieval Europe sustained itself across centuries marked by uncertainty, scarcity, and change. Its endurance was not the result of exceptional moments, but of ordinary decisions repeated faithfully. And in recognizing this, we come closer to understanding the medieval experience as it was lived, not as an age defined by distance from the present, but as a continuous human effort to persist together within the limits of the world as it was known. As medieval life unfolded through this sustained practice of calibration and restraint, it gradually fostered a deep familiarity with uncertainty that shaped how people thought about risk. Risk was not avoided entirely, but it was approached cautiously and collectively. Decisions with far-reaching consequences were rarely made alone. They were discussed, observed, and tested against memory. This collective evaluation reduced the chance that a single misjudgment would endanger many. Such caution did not imply paralysis. Medieval people acted decisively when necessary. They repaired after storms, moved livestock during floods, and reorganized labor during illness. What distinguished their action was its grounding in precedent. Response followed recognition. People asked, often implicitly, whether a situation resembled something endured before. If it did, the response followed familiar lines. If it did not, experimentation was limited and reversible where possible. This preference for reversible action shaped medieval adaptation. Changes were made incrementally so they could be undone if they proved harmful. Fields were expanded cautiously. New tools were adopted alongside old ones. Trade relationships were diversified rather than replaced. This layered approach reduced dependency on any single innovation and preserved resilience. The medieval experience of scarcity reinforced this prudence. Scarcity revealed how quickly conditions could worsen when balance was lost. It sharpened awareness of fragility and reinforced the value of caution. In times of abundance, people remembered scarcity. They saved, repaired, and prepared. Memory moderated behavior long after conditions improved. This moderation extended into social expectations. Excessive display was discouraged not only by custom, but by practicality. Resources spent on display could not be used for survival. Status was acknowledged through responsibility rather than extravagance. A respected household was one that endured and supported others, not one that stood apart. As medieval societies persisted, these expectations shaped norms of leadership. Leaders were expected to embody restraint. Authority that demonstrated moderation earned trust. Authority that indulged excess invited resentment and withdrawal. The legitimacy of power rested on its contribution to collective stability rather than its capacity for command. This dynamic produced a subtle form of accountability. Leaders depended on cooperation. Cooperation depended on trust. Trust depended on demonstrated care. Power, though unequal, remained relational. It was sustained through responsiveness rather than fear alone. The relational nature of medieval power extended into economic life. Markets existed, but they were embedded within social relationships. Transactions were rarely anonymous. Buyers and sellers knew one another. Credit relied on reputation. Trust substituted for formal enforcement. Economic activity reinforced social bonds rather than replacing them. This embedded economy shaped attitudes toward profit. Profit was acceptable when it supported stability. Excessive profit at the expense of others threatened cohesion. Communities tolerated inequality, but they resisted exploitation that endangered survival. Moral judgment followed consequence. The medieval relationship with work further reinforced these values. Work was respected not because it produced wealth, but because it sustained life. Tasks were valued for their necessity rather than their prestige. Essential labor carried dignity. Dependence on others' labor fostered respect across roles. Over time, this respect tempered hierarchy. While status differences remained, they were moderated by mutual reliance. A lord depended on peasants for production. Craftsmen depended on farmers for food. Clergy depended on lay support. This interdependence constrained domination and encouraged negotiation. The experience of repeated crisis reinforced this negotiation. During hardship, rigid hierarchy weakened. Practical cooperation took precedence. People adapted roles temporarily, redistributing labor and responsibility. These moments revealed the underlying flexibility of medieval society beneath its formal structures. As centuries passed, this flexibility allowed medieval life to absorb cumulative change without losing coherence. Gradual shifts in climate, population, and economy altered conditions, but communities adapted by drawing on familiar practices. Memory guided response. Balance remained the goal. The medieval understanding of balance extended beyond material concerns. Emotional balance mattered as well. Excessive despair or optimism threatened judgment. People learned to hold uncertainty without surrendering to it. This emotional steadiness supported long endurance. Faith played a role in sustaining this steadiness, offering frameworks that contextualized suffering and reaffirmed continuity. Yet faith alone did not replace action. Belief and effort coexisted. People prayed and repaired, hoped and prepared. Meaning did not absolve responsibility. As medieval life continued in this rhythm, it shaped a culture of attentiveness. People watched carefully weather, behavior, signs of strain. Attention was survival. It allowed early response and prevented escalation. Communities functioned as networks of observation, sharing information through conversation and routine interaction. This attentiveness reduced surprise. Even when outcomes were unfavorable, they were rarely incomprehensible. People understood how and why conditions had worsened. This understanding mitigated panic and preserved order. Knowledge did not eliminate hardship, but it made it navigable. Through these practices, caution, memory, moderation, and attention, medieval people constructed a way of life capable of withstanding prolonged uncertainty. Their resilience was not dramatic. It was cumulative. It grew through repetition and adjustment rather than sudden change. In observing this endurance, we see that medieval Europe was sustained not by rigid control or relentless progress, but by a careful balance between action and restraint. As people learned how to live with risk without surrendering stability. That balance, maintained across generations, allowed ordinary lives to continue under extraordinary conditions. And in that continuation, in the daily choices to repair, share, wait, and adapt, the medieval world persisted, quietly shaping the long course of European history.